All right, so agents will complete all of their quotes by going to GuideLink. Their agency information and producer information will automatically show. They will select their state. They will enter their effective date. And then they will search by the class that they're looking for. They have two ways to search. They can start typing the name, and it will bring up anything that contains that name. So the search is a starts with match, and if that fails, it's a contains with match. So either way the agent is looking for it, will be able to find it. The other way that they can do it, if they happen to know the class code, is to type that class code number in, and it will bring up the matching classification description. So either way they wish to search is how they can do that. They will then click search, and if the state is effective, if it's past the effective date for release, and if that is an industry that is within our appetite, then they will be taken to the portal. So what will carry through is the class code that they entered on the previous screen. It then generates all of the questions that are applicable to the BOP industry overall, as well as that particular industry. So in this example, we are going to fail these questions. By fail, meaning we're picking things that are outside of appetite for this policy, because we want to show you the messaging that the agent will receive. While we're doing this, a couple of things to keep in mind. We will take up to 2 losses in the last 3 years, 5 million TIV, which is building and contents, at a single location, up to 5 locations, up to 50 employees, up to 6 million gross sales at a single location. If they're a contractor, that changes to payroll, and we will take up to 500,000 payroll. And then square footage is the total square footage of the largest building on the submission. For office, it's up to 100,000. For restaurant, 7,500. And for every other industry, 35,000. But again, in this example, we are purposely putting in answers that are outside of our appetite so we can show you what that looks like. We will click next. And then that's going to tell us that this is not eligible for a business owner's product. There is a hyperlink to a button called Why. If you click on Why, it will then tell you all of the reasons why this particular quote is not eligible for insurance under our business owner's product. And the agent can scroll through those reasons, click OK. If they wanted to go back and change the answers, they would click the back button, and it will allow them to adjust those answers. We will be tracking the adjustments to those answers, but they will be able to go backwards and make an adjustment should they have made a mistake. Since this is a church, it may not be eligible for our business owner's product, but it could be eligible for our commercial package policy. So we're going to show the agent that there is a commercial package policy option, and we're also showing them that there's a workers' compensation option. The reason why auto and umbrella do not show right there is because we do not write those 2 products monoline, but we will write them in conjunction with the commercial package policy. It also gives the agent the email address that they can enter to send that application to us for consideration to that commercial package policy. The difference for the other industries, so if it's an industry other than church, if it's a contractor, a habitational risk, an office, a restaurant, a retail, a service, or a wholesaler, we do not have a commercial package policy option for those industries with Guide 1 at this time. So we would only show them workers' compensation as an option, and we will show them the address to email the application for consideration for that monoline workers' compensation policy. But we're going to go back and change our answers. We're going to do 2 things. We're going to change to a different class code because we want to show you some slightly different questions. So we're going to search for a florist, and you can see that it brings up 2 different types of florist, a distributor and a retail. We're going to pick the retail, and that's going to generate a smaller subset of questions. And the reason for that is for our church industry, we ask every question that we need to know from an appetite and an eligibility standpoint on that one screen. For our other classifications of business, we do have an appetite screen, which you're seeing right now, and then a separate eligibility screen that we will show you in just a second. But in this case, we're going to answer these questions correctly. Again, the same eligibility criteria that I discussed a few minutes ago regarding the number of losses, the size of the risk, et cetera, applies. That applies to all of our industries. So again, we're making up some examples right now. And we're going to click Next. And this is going to tell us we have two available products for you. We have a business owner's product and we have a workers' compensation product. At this time, our workers' compensation product is not in a portal. That is something that we are standing up quickly next year. So at this time, if you wanted to do a workers' comp, you would need to send in that application to that email address that is shown right there. In this case, we are going to do a business owner's policy, so we click Next, and we'll be taken further into the portal. And this screen is our business information page, and what's required here is the name of the business and the business location. So we're going to type that information in, and then we're going to click Search. When we click Search, two things are going to happen. We're going to verify that this is not already insured with Guide 1, and we're going to standardize the address. So we click Search, and it's going to tell you we are verifying those address details. And it's going to tell you that we found some other accounts. If the agent wanted to use one of those other accounts, they would click on the account number. But if this was a new account, which this is, you would click Create New Account. And it's going to further expand that business information page. We need to put in the entity type, and we need to put in the year the business started. No other piece of information is required on this page, but you can see that there are some optional things. So primary contact information, for instance, is optional. The reason it's optional at this point is you oftentimes do not know that information this early in the quote process. However, we will require the primary contact information, the name, the phone number, and the email address before this quote can actually be released into issuance. You will see the business location that you entered just a second ago, and then you have the ability to enter additional locations should you have those. You would click on Add Location. It brings up a box for you to type that information in, and then you would save it. In this example, we're going to have a one-location policy. And then below, you see the applicable class codes. The primary class code is what you entered on the prior page. It cannot be changed. And the reason for that is we are determining an offering for that industry and that classification that is based on either the TIV or the number of employees, dependent upon the industry. And what that offering is a set of defaulted coverages that are very commonly selected by that type of industry. It's also limits that that industry typically needs to have. So we can't have you changing the primary classification because everything on subsequent screens is based upon that. If this applicant had other business operations that aren't contemplated in that primary classification, you can add them here. You would click Yes, and it will bring up the ability for you to search by class name or class code number, just like on the prior page. So we're going to do a search. We're going to add an additional classification. We're going to click the plus, and you will see it shows up right underneath your primary as an added classification. If you determine that you really don't need that classification, you click the trash can, and it will remove it. You can continue adding these classifications for as many as you have by following that same process. But we're going to change our answer and say that we don't have any other classifications, and then we're going to click Next. And what happens upon Next is we're going to start this submission. We're creating an account behind the scenes in our policy administration system, which means everything from this point on can be tracked by our underwriter, and you can be involved in the process with an underwriter should you have questions or need additional assistance. What's happened now is you can see an account number has been created on the right, and on the left, a quote number has been created. On the left rail, you also see that we're tracking your process through this quote. And so the full circle for besides eligibility shows that where you're at, and all of the empty circles show what you have to complete to be able to get to that quote. And again, this just allows you to track your process. Everything that you're doing from this point on is being saved in a dashboard for you so that you are not losing your information. So these eligibility questions or qualification questions are based on the primary classification that you entered as well as any additional classifications that you have entered. We're going to answer all of these correctly so that we can proceed and click Next. This is the last set of questions that you will need to answer regarding appetite or eligibility to be determined whether or not this product can meet the needs for you. So any other questions that we ask from this point on are purely underwriting questions that determine whether or not this business can straight through process or whether or not this business is going to need to go to an underwriter to make sure that we have properly conditioned the policy. So this is the policy information page. We need you to put in your prior pay plan, and then in the middle section, you see commonly edited coverages. So the reason why we have these in this section is because these are things that we find that agents typically want to be able to change. We are defaulting to some answers, but you can see there is a drop down beside each one. You can click on that and change the limit to whatever you need for this particular risk, and it will adjust it on the back end. But we're going to leave it with our defaults. And again, you can do this for any commonly edited coverages. What you see underneath that is what's included in this quote. And there's two sections in what's included in this quote. If you click on the little accordion, there is a must-have and a suggested section. We have help text beside both of them. The must-have is anything that's included in that base policy form, as well as any mandatory coverages that the industry has to have. The coverages cannot be removed, but where allowed, you can modify the limits. And then underneath that, you have suggested coverages. Those are those offerings that I talked about. So we have suggested coverages and limits based on what we find that those industries typically need. You can take those coverages off and you can adjust the limits should you choose so. So we're going to expand the must-have section first. And you can see that the coverages cannot be removed, but there are drop-downs beside the coverages where you can go in and change that limit. You would just select a different limit, and it's going to automatically change the color of that box to orange. And the reason for that is we want to allow you to track anything that you did change from our defaults. You can change it back, or you can leave it as it is. And again, you can do this for any of the coverages in this section. We're going to close this section and show you what the suggested coverages looks like. So the suggested coverages have a checkbox beside each one. That means you can take that coverage off if you don't want to have it. The other option is to change the limit on those coverages. So you will see the drop down beside each one of them. You can change the limit or leave it as it is. So that's how the suggested coverage section will work. We're going to close that section, and there's one other coverage section. It's called Additional Coverage Options. If you click on that hyperlink, this includes coverages that are electable. They're not commonly taken coverages, but you can scroll down on the right, find all of the coverages that are available in this section, and select them as you need for this particular quote. Or you can go at the top and start typing in what you think that coverage is called, and it will bring up anything that includes that those letters in it. You can select them as you need and click Add. But we're not going to do that for this example. We're just going to say everything that has been selected is good. You can see that their included location shows everything that you had on the prior page. And then you've got some underwriting questions underneath it. These underwriting questions are line level underwriting questions. Again, they do not determine eligibility because this risk is already eligible. But it does determine whether or not we want it to go to an underwriter or not. Sometimes a risk, if it, for instance, has athletic teams that it sponsors, we may have a couple of other questions that we need to ask, or we may need to add an additional endorsement to this policy to make sure that your insured is covered. But in this case, we've answered all of them so that this would just straight through process, and we're going to click Next. It's going to tell you that it's processing coverage details, and the reason for that is you may have made some changes during this that we need to make sure that we're accounting for in the rating, and again, making sure that we have everything that your insured needs. So we're going to move from the line level screen to the location level screen with that. And one thing to note as we're going through this, we are in a test environment. So because we're in a test environment, it does take a lot more time than it does in a live environment. If there are notifications on the policy that we need to tell the agent, in this case there are some coverages that have been added based on entries that we have made. They're at the top. So that's why it has stopped us, because we want to make sure that the agent sees those notifications, can make any adjustments they want, and then click Next again. That is something that will be rare that it happens, but we did make some changes as we were going through these examples to you, so it did need to provide us with some additional notifications. When we get to the location screen, it's going to look just like the screen that you saw before. We've got some frequently edited things at the top, so we need to know how far it is to the water source or hydrant, so you would select that. And then we also have the property deductible highlighted for you so that you do not have to search for that information. You can leave it with the default, or you can change that. Underneath that, you have what's included in this quote. Looks just like it did on the prior page, but these are location-level coverages, whereas the prior page had policy-level coverages. But we're not going to add any coverages or make any differences. Then you see included buildings. And the reason why you're seeing an included building when you didn't type one in is because we're running integrations throughout this entire process to be able to pull that information back for the agent so that you do not have to enter it yourself. It limits the amount of keystrokes. So our integration has pulled back business characteristics as well as building characteristics for this risk. And it's told us that this location has a building at 6,600 square feet. The agent can either say, no, that's not applicable, and unclick it, or they can leave it. But we're going to say, yes, this is applicable, and we're going to click Next. And it's going to, again, tell you that we are pre-filling information. We are running some additional integrations to pre-fill building information and to pre-fill roof information. And again, the purpose of that is so that you do not have to enter that information yourself. So this has brought back some information on the building. Our integration has told us that this particular building is joisted masonry. You can change that construction type as well. You have the option to add the building. If you need building coverage, you click on that, and it will show you the other items that we were able to pre-fill. So we know the year built, we know the number of stories, and we know the building area. The roof information will also be pre-filled for you. At this time, because we are still in a test environment and still in the middle of production, the roof information is not hooked up yet, but it would be pre-filled for you as well. You have some information on the year the wiring was updated, the plumbing and the heating. That's optional, but if you do know that information, we would ask that you enter it. But we're going to say, and then underneath that, we've got the limit, and we've got the valuation at replacement cost. The limit, again, is pre-filled from our integration. It's gone in and done a replacement cost estimate for this building based on the building characteristics that are all behind the scenes from our integration and entered a limit for it. You can adjust that limit if you need to. But we're going to say we don't need building coverage, so we're going to take that off. And you're going to see business personal property coverage. Every business owner's policy is required to have at least 5,000 business personal property coverage. You do not have to have a building on the policy, but you do have to have 5,000 in contents coverage. You see the section of what's included in this quote. It looks just like it did on the prior pages, but these are building level coverages. We don't have anything else that we need to add. We don't have anything that we want to change. So we're just going to go a little further down, and you can see that we are required to assign a class to this building and to put in square footage. There is a drop down for the class, but in this case, you've only entered one class on the policy, so there's only one thing in the drop down. Had you entered multiple classifications to this policy, there would be additional things that are shown for you to select from. And the reason for this is sometimes you have a building that will have multiple classifications in it. So we need to know what is the square footage for each one of those classifications. If you want to add a classification, you can click on the Add Classification button, and it will bring up the ability for you to search class codes and to add those to this building as well. But we don't have any others that we want to add, so we're just going to click Save. The other option that you have at the bottom is the ability to add other buildings. So maybe you didn't have another building, or maybe the integration didn't bring in another building. We've got the ability for you to add that if there were ones that we did not find. You also have your underwriting questions that you have seen before. These are building level underwriting questions. Again, they do not determine that this risk is not eligible for us, but it does determine whether or not it needs to go to an underwriter or not. We're going to go back up because we, in a test environment, have got to answer one of these questions with regards to the default. So we're going to do that really quickly, and then we're going to be able to proceed forward to the next page. And this is going to take us to our very last page. Again, we're processing any coverage details that you've made. We're processing any answers to underwriting questions that you have provided, and we're going to fill what's called our blanket and additional insured page. And this blanket and additional insured page is sort of the catch-all for things that aren't very common, but we want to put them in one place for them to be easy for you to find. If you needed to add a blanket, if you needed to add an additional name insured or an additional interest, you just click on the plus sign and it brings up the information that you need to complete that. But we don't have any of those in this quote, so we're going to click Quote. When we do that, it's going to generate our quote. And what is happening is it is going through and, again, compiling all the answers that you have given us to any underwriting questions. It's compiling any coverages that you may or may not have changed. It is finishing any integrations that we need to pull in. And it is rating this policy so that we can provide you with a quote for this risk so that you can determine if Guide 1 is the correct outlet for you. Again, because we are in a test environment, it does take a little bit of time for us to quote, but on average, it takes less than 30 seconds for this generate quote to actually happen. So we're going to give it just a second for it to generate in this test environment, and then we will show you what that quote page looks like. All right, so this has brought us to our quote page, and you can see the top has the total premium, and then underneath that you see some general information on this policy. You've got your customer information, that is what you entered on the business information page. If you had given us the customer contact on that business information page, it would show in the center, and then the agency information shows on the right. Underneath that, you see the term for your business owner's policy. You see the liability limits, your submission number, and then your total policy premium again. To the left is the View Quote Proposal. We're not going to show you that at this point, but you would click on that. It will bring up everything that you quoted, and that includes anything that you changed and anything that we defaulted for you. You can save that to your desktop. You can save that and email it to your insured, whatever you need to do. Should you need to edit your quote, you can see the pencil to the right. You would click on that, and it will then allow you to edit any of those pieces of information, and then you can view another quote proposal of that. It does overwrite your quote, but you can obviously save each individual quote as you see fit. And then underneath that, you see that we have got two other lines of business that we could help this particular business owner's policy with, workers' compensation and business auto. This is just a reminder of that, and we've got the email address for you to send that information into our small business unit. But we are happy with this quote, and we have no changes to make, so we're going to click Purchase. And because it's going to take us to our next page where we're going to enter our billing information, that means that this risk is eligible for straight-through processing. It means that nothing has been entered that is going to cause an underwriter to need to review it before it can be released. So you've got your billing information at the top. You can change that because oftentimes maybe the primary address of that location is not where you want that bill to go to. So you have the option to say that you want to have a different address, but we're going to leave it the way it is. Then you have your payment information. We're defaulting to monthly, and we show you your down payment required for that. But you can change the default to quarterly, semi-annual, or annual, and every time you change, your down payment required will change so that you always know exactly how much information we need you to collect from the insured to be able to bind this policy. We're going to leave it as annual. You are required here to put in that primary contact name, mobile phone, and email address. If you had entered it on the business information page, it would automatically pre-fill it for you. But since you did not, we're going to go ahead and enter that right now. Then underneath, you can see the signature option. We are defaulting this to electronic signature. You can change that if the insured does not want their policy documents generated electronically, but we're going to leave it with yes. Because you entered the email address already, we're automatically pre-filling that for you. Again, limiting keystrokes. Agent information is automatically pre-filled as well based on what we have for the email address for the company. But you can change that if you need to. You'll click Next. It's going to then bring you to the very last page. If you had selected ACH on the prior page for monthly, it would then give you the option to enter your banking information for that monthly draft. But we selected annual, so that's not going to show. So what you do need to do on this screen is that you acknowledge that you have collected that required minimum premium to issue the policy, and then you attest that everything that you told us is true and accurate on the submission. Once you click both of those, the very last thing that you need to do is complete purchase. So we'll click the complete purchase button. It's going to verify everything that you told us on the account information to make sure that there's no concerns. It is also going to verify the loss information that you gave us. If for some reason there's a difference between the loss information and what our integration returns, we are going to need to send that to an underwriter. But that would be the only other thing that would stop this policy from issuing. So now it's going to tell you, congrats, you have a new policy. It's going to show you that customer information, that customer contact information, and that agency information again. It's going to show you the policy premium front and center, and then it's going to show you the policy period and the policy number, as well as what payment plan you selected for that. And then you've got a link that you can click for the policy documents. One thing to remember is that you also have a dashboard in GuideLink where you as the agent can go in and view your quote at any point during the process. Once you get past that business information screen, like we told you before, everything is saved in that dashboard for you as an active quote. Once it's released, it will show you that that policy has been issued on your dashboard, and you'd be able to review your policy documents in the dashboard as well. But this is it. You have a new policy at this point, and you can move on to your next quote. I know it took about 25 minutes for us to go through that, but that was because we were showing you everything, talking about all of the integrations as we were doing it, and we were also in a test environment. In real-world scenario, for one location, one building policy, with the number of integrations that we have pre-filling for you on the back end, it takes between 5 to 7 minutes. So thank you for watching this, and happy quoting.